So you just got into project management, or you just landed your first project management job, and you're trying to figure out what are those basic but necessary things that I need to know in order to be successful in this role. Well, stay tuned, because in this video, I'll be giving you my top 10 basic project management tips that every project manager needs to know in order to be successful in the role of a project manager. Hello, YouTube family. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Christina and this is Cultivated Chrissy. Now today's video is for my new PMs or my experienced PMs looking to gain a refresher on those fundamental project management things that are needed in order to be successful in the role of a PM. Now, these skills are not just technical, but they're also the soft skills, the approach methods, etc. So in no particular order, let's jump right into it. So tip number 1, you need to know and fully understand 3 key terms, and that is project, scope, and deliverables. We're definitely going to just start there. So knowing those 3 terms help you to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you're trying to produce as a result of that work. Essentially knowing what you're trying to accomplish and why. Now, term number 1, project. Every project is temporary and it has a start and an end. And at the end of all that work, you are going to produce something, right? PMI defines this as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Deliverables, your second term, is essentially what is going to be produced as an output of this project. And it could be a lot of different smaller things, products, services, or results, right? Those smaller things adding up to a larger thing, which is basically what you're trying to accomplish for the overall project, that overall product, service, or result. So those smaller things leading up to this one larger thing. Now your scope, your third term, is essentially the work that is going to be needed in order to produce those deliverables, right? It encompasses all of that. And it's defined in your initiation phases of the project as well as your planning phases of the project. For all 3 terms, you want to make sure that your documentation clearly defines what those 3 things are. If not, you're going to have to work with your team in order to facilitate gathering that information. It is very important that you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, right? And what is going to be produced as a result of your work before heading into the project. Tip number 2 is knowing the 5 phases of the project life cycle. And so what are they? Initiate, plan, execute, monitor and control, and close, right? So you're gonna wanna know what those are. PMI has a document that describes those 5 phases, the 13 different knowledge areas, and then the processes within that, right? There are 49 different processes. I will leave a link to that document down below. You want to make sure that you look at it, you review it, you study it, look at best practices that are involved in each of those processes, really using it as a blueprint, right, for you. You're not going to need to use every single one in every project, but just try to immerse yourself in what each of those processes are and gain a general understanding of what's involved in each and what documents you can use to support each. Tip number 3 is all about keeping it simple. As I just mentioned, there are 49 different process groups, but you don't need to do all 49 on a project. You really want to look at what the project requirements are, look at your organization and the culture and the stakeholders involved, how they like to be communicated to, right? And think about what's best for your project at your organization. You want to tailor your systems, your processes that you're going to use for the project based on that. I also would say, in order to keep it simple, you want to consolidate where possible. We don't want to bog down people with heavy documentation that represents each group, but instead you can consolidate some documentation, right? I like to consolidate my stakeholder matrix and my communications matrix, right? And there's other examples of that, but try to consolidate where possible. Keep it simple, and that will be best when going into my next step. So the next step is tip number 4, and that is to document everything, right? There's a saying that we like to say that if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So you want to make sure that everything is documented. Keep things up to date. People will forget. You will forget, your stakeholders will forget. And so you want to make sure that you document everything where possible, right? And it's key to do that, and it's better to do that when things are simplified, right? Your documentation is consolidated and you don't have many things to keep updated, right? But you can stay on top of that. So tip number 5 is all about preparation. There's a poem that I have been taught, right? And that is the 12 P's. And it says, piss poor preparation promotes piss poor performance, and piss poor performance promotes pain, right? So preparation is absolutely key. It is vital, right? And if you do that, right, you'll just be putting yourself in a better position, right? Prepare yourself, look over all the documentation, right, that you've been keeping up to date, right? And make sure that in every interaction, before every meeting, you look over your materials, you know where your project is, you know where your pain points are, you know where your risks are, you know what's happening in your project, so that at any point, if someone asks you what's going on, you have the general landscape, right? You need to do this by keeping up with your documentation, talking to your team, all of that. And so make sure that you are prepared. Don't be caught off guard, right? Because it's only going to help you to be better in your role. Know where your project is at all times. And so another key to being successful in the role of a project manager is having high performance meetings. Now, what do I mean by that, right? You want to make sure that you have good meeting etiquette. And that starts off, one, with an agenda, right? You want to make sure that you define your objective for each meeting. You list out your topics and timestamp each topic. You want to make sure that for each topic, you also put what you want as a result of that conversation, whether it's to inform somebody of something, have a decision made, etc., right? And you want to make sure that throughout the meeting, you stick to those timestamps, right? You put things in a parking lot if things are kind of going off topic, right? And you can tell people that we'll get to that, but stick to the intended result of each topic and the overall objective of the meeting. You want to make sure that you do that. You want to have high performance meetings, right? That also means starting on time and ending on time, right? People know that when they come into your meetings that we're going to do what we intended to do, right? You want to feel that at the end of it, you've accomplished the goal. Document everything once again, right? You want to make sure that you're putting everything in a meeting minutes format. You can create a standard template for yourself to make this process easier. I can also share a template with you guys if you're interested. But you want to make sure that you document those key items, those key decision points that were talked about in the meeting, right? And then also those action items or next steps. You want to make sure you go through that. At the start of every meeting, like I said, you want to start on time, but you also want to reiterate the objective, right? What the agenda is going to be for that meeting, and then your intended result. Kind of giving them kind of an upfront contract. This is what we're doing. Does everybody agree? And then jump right into it and make sure that at the end of it, you've met the intended objective. My next tip is about utilizing strengths, right? At the start of your project, you're going to be given a project team. Know what each of their strengths are, know what their weaknesses are, and make sure that you incorporate that into your project when assigning responsibilities, right? Make sure that you utilize people's strengths. This is a basic tip, but it's a necessary one because it'll make things go a lot faster and a lot smoother, right? You don't want to give somebody something that is not their strength, right? Because it's definitely going to impact your project. So that is tip number 7, utilize strengths. So tip number 8 is all about communication, right? This is going to be vital throughout your project. And you can communicate with people in a number of different ways, right? Whether it's phone call, whether it's email, whether it's a Teams message, right? Whether it's just through a report that you send out weekly or monthly, right? But the key here is understanding who those key stakeholders are in your project and the communication style that best suits them, right? You want to know what these communication styles are. You want to document them, right? And the best way to get that information is to just ask them, right? How best can I communicate the status or the progress of a project with you? You want to make sure that you get that answer from them, you document it, right? There's a stakeholder matrix and a communications matrix. I like to combine the two, right? And if you guys are interested, let me know. I can share a template with you guys, but make sure that you document that. And then later on, when I'm developing my reporting plan, right, how I'm going to report updates on the project, right, I can look at the different communication styles and come up with a solution that works best for the team, right, based on those communication styles. You want to communicate, right, through kind of standard formats, but then also individual formats, and your reporting plan will encompass all of that. As I mentioned in the previous step, the best way to get information is to ask questions. And so that brings me to tip number 9, and that is to just ask, right? You're not going to know everything. You're not going to be the expert on everything in the project, right? All the different intricacies of how you're going to get to the result, right? That's why we have subject matter experts and technical experts, right? So you want to utilize those people's strengths, right? Speak to them about what's needed on the projects, ask questions, right? And you really just be in the role of a facilitator, someone who can pull that information out of people to utilize it best on the project. So ask questions, don't assume anything, right? Because that can lead to a lot of reworking if you're not careful. So make sure that you just ask questions. If you don't know something, find the expert and ask them. Now, tip number 10 is all about follow-up, right? Now, this could be one of the not so fun pieces of the role of a project manager, but it is vital to making sure that you're constantly progressing and going towards the end goal of your project, right? You want to have to constantly check in with people, right? And as I mentioned before, you can have your standard ways of communicating progress and getting updates, right? And you can also have your individualized kind of ways of getting those information, right? And so for me, right, when developing my reporting plan, I'm looking at possibly sending weekly emails, right, to say this is what's happening this week, right? This is what's late. This is what's coming up. This is what's due by so-and-so date. You want to make sure that you have a forum to be able to share that with people. I do that through a weekly email, right? You can also have weekly status meetings, right? Those are really vital. Most of the time you want to have those, or you can have daily stand-ups as well. But try to have some standard ways in which you're sharing project information and gathering updates. And secondly, you can have those one-on-one forums, right, where you just go have meetings with certain people on the project team, right? You're getting updates from them individually, right? You could do Teams messages, whatever the case may be, but just try to have a mixture of those kind of standardized ways of gathering information and sharing information, as well as those individualized ways of doing so. That combination is definitely going to be best in order for you to stay consistent with follow-up. So those are my top 10 basic PM tips. Like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more videos on how to master the role of a PM. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.